Hi, in this video I would like to show you how to use the ventilator simulator tool available on the ICU Learning website. First, I go to the website iculearning.com. Once you go to the website, you should scroll until you see the mechanical ventilation section. Once you go to the mechanical ventilation section, then you're provided several login options. If you don't want to provide your email or your phone number, then you can log in as a guest. Once you log in as a guest, you are provided with the ventilator simulator. There are several scenarios. In this video, I will go through the main scenario representing normal lungs, and I will show you how to use the simulator. So I go ahead and then click normal lungs. This is going to load up the simulator. The top section here, you see a window representing the waveforms that you will see on virtually all mechanical ventilators. So the first waveform represents the airway pressure, the second waveform represents the flow, and the third waveform represents the volume. We will go through those waveforms in future videos, but it's important to be able to assess the waveform when managing patients on mechanical ventilation, and you can get insights into the mechanics of mechanical ventilation by assessing these waveforms. A couple of things I want to show you with the waveforms. You can click with your mouse, and when you click, you should be able to pause the simulation. That will give you time to assess the waveform. If you click again, then the waveform or the simulation will continue to go. Also, as you hover your mouse over the waveform, then you will get a section in time, and you will get the variables representing the time, the airway pressure, the flow, and the volume. So the first variable is time in seconds, so that's the time during that simulation. The second variable, PAW, is the airway pressure in centimeter of water. The third variable is the flow of gas in liters per minute. And the third variable is volume in milliliters. And so, for example, at this specific section, the airway pressure was 5 centimeters of water. That's the first waveform. The second waveform, the flow, was about minus 7 liters per minute. And the third variable, the volume at that point, was 116 milliliters. I will go ahead and click again to let the simulation continue. The second section here allows you to control the simulation. So first, you can see the play pause button. That's basically equivalent to clicking on the waveform. If you click, you pause the simulation. If you click again, then you will continue the simulation. Clear allows you to clear the simulation area. So if I click clear, then I basically clear the simulation area. Reset also clear the simulation area, but it's also different in that it will reset any of the variables below to the startup variables. Then in blue, you see 4 buttons. Those buttons allow you to change the scaling on the x-axis and on the y-axis. And so, for example, you see the X plus button will allow you to increase the scaling on the x-axis. Also note that as you change the scaling on the x-axis, the duration of the simulation changes. And so, for example, now that waveform area represents 14 seconds of simulation time. If I decrease the scaling, then I get 28 seconds in simulation time in that window. And so in a way, changing the scaling also changes the speed of the simulation. Next is changing the axis on the y-axis. And so if I hit X plus, then I can zoom into those waveforms. So you can see that the waveforms are larger. If I zoom in again, then you can start to see that some of the waveforms are now going out of screen. If I zoom back out, then I get them back into view. Okay, the next section you have got two buttons. One button is a slow down button and the other one is a speed up button. Using those allow you to change the speed of the simulation as well. So it's in a way similar to changing the scaling on the x-axis in that it changes the speed of the simulation, but it doesn't change the shape of the waveforms or the scaling on the x-axis. So feel free to change or to play with them and see which one fits you best. Next, there's two buttons that allow you to do diagnostic modalities that we do for patients on mechanical ventilation. The first one will do an end inspiratory pause and would allow you to assess the plateau pressure. And the second one would do an end expiratory pause and it would allow you to check the total PEEP. So I will start by checking an end inspiratory pause. So now you see at the end of the inspiration, I have an inspiratory pause or a plateau pressure. And then if I let go, then we go back to the simulation. It's actually helpful to pause the simulation after that the inspiratory pause to assess the pressure. And you can basically hover your mouse over until you get to the pause. And then here, for example, you see that the airway pressure was 10. And so that means that the plateau pressure in this instance was 10 centimeter of water. I will let the simulation continue. Next, I plan to check an end expiratory pause. So now we're doing an end expiratory pause. In this instance, the patient doesn't have an auto PEEP. And so you don't really see a change in the waveform. But actually, if you pay very close attention, you can also you can see that there is a slight increase in the flow from a slightly negative pressure to 0. So that's when I did the end expiratory pause maneuver. You see in this instance that the airway pressure remains at 5 or the PEEP, so that means that the patient does not have any auto PEEP, and the total PEEP equals the PEEP in this instance. I will then give you an example of a patient where you have auto PEEP. I plan to go into more detail later, but in this instance, I want to show you how to use the end expiratory pause to assess for auto PEEP. So I will wait for the breath to be delivered, as you can see here, and then I'm going to hit the end expiratory pause. And now in this instance, you can clearly see that there is an uptick in the pressure waveform. So this patient has a little bit of an auto PEEP. Notice that before we did the end expiratory pause, that the airway pressure was at 5 centimeters of water, and so that's basically equal to the PEEP. And then when we did the end expiratory pause, we get an airway pressure of 6. So the total PEEP equals 6. So that means that the patient has 1 centimeter of water of auto PEEP. So 6 minus 5 equals 1. Okay. There are additional options here, which I won't go into details about in this video, since my goal is to illustrate the basic use of the simulator. I also want to draw your attention to the fact that many pertinent metrics are reported in that line here. So for example, you see the peak pressure is reported, the plateau pressure is reported, the total PEEP, the delivered volume, the retained volume, um, and other variables here as well.